Hi Ngozi, here's the feedback for the mock, the reading part of the mock that you did recently. And you scored 4 marks for the first question, so that's a good start with the full 4 marks. And moving on to question 2, where you've been asked to analyse how the writer uses language to describe the effects of the storm. You confused me a little bit when you started off saying the writer's choices of using simple, complex sentence. Well, it's either simple or it's complex, it can't be both, to describe the effect of the storm. He said highlighted the activity of the storm. It says it's a windy, rainy morning. So you've given the quote of the wind lashing the trees, rain on the rooftop and thunder. I said that this simply means there was a heavy downpour accompanied by the thunder as well as severe gales, which is strong enough to shake everything around. I like your use of pathetic fallacy to describe Alex's sensations of being adrift in a boat. Well, I think you could have gone further to explain how the weather is mimicking what's going on in Alex's life, that it's in a turmoil. I think had you done that bit, you would have scored up into the high level 3 band. You said that gives him the impression that he woke up shaking, panicking, and only finding comfort in the dog. You mentioned the hyperbole of spilling in furious waves against the rocks, and the use of the adjective furious symbolised that the ocean was not at peace as it was a stormy day. You've mentioned the blackbird here in this paragraph and his mum, but I'm not sure that's relevant to the question where you've been asked to describe the effects of the storm. And then in this paragraph here, you said the use of adverb tangled. It's not an adverb, but it is. I mean, your explanation of it's good, but just your terminology is slightly off there. But I think what you've done is good, and it deserves to be in the level 3. So I think it's a 5 out of a possible 8 marks for that question, so well done. Moving on to question 3, where you're asked to analyse how the text has been structured to interest you as a reader. And you've started off well with the first paragraph captivates my interest by describing the nightmare Alexander had had. But then you've gone back into a language question. You've started talking about the adjectives, the use of the word enormous, use of the word adverb. So none of that is relevant because you're talking about the language there, not the actual structure. However, down here we come back onto structure. So you say, as the story progressed to the second paragraph where the writer described how Alex was awakened by the noise from the storm, this creates the fear in Alex. And he's had a terrible nightmare of being awoken by the storm. He says this further creates a huge fear in him from being worried about the nightmare to the terrible weather. And you've given a good explanation here of I can only imagine the fear and concern in his face. You've shown that they highlighted the time of the morning, 6:30, goes to show that the story took place in midwinter when it struggles in the morning to get light. And you've given a good quote there of the terrible day. And there have been a lot of days like this since his mother got sick. And you said that this shows that Alex had got used to his situation, being forced to care for himself. And you've gone on to explain how his mum is and how she looks. And you said he also describes his father, who makes an effort at making pancakes, and his sister. And then you've gone back to the language here rather than the structure. So if we look at the mark scheme, level 2, it says attempts to comment on the effect of the structural features. Well, you have done that in parts, and you've selected 1 or 2 appropriate examples, and you've made some use of subject terminology, mainly appropriately. So for this structure question, the terminology that we're looking for is things like the first paragraph, and then as the story progressed to the second paragraph, it further creates, I like this bit, the highlight of the time of the morning, but then you've gone off. So you've done it a little bit, so I think it's got to stay at level 2, so it's 4 out of the possible 8 marks for that question. Had you focused a bit more on the structure and how in the first half it's all about Alex and his nightmare and his worries about his mum, and then the second part introduces the rest of the family and we see the interaction between him and his sisters and the fact that there's seems to be undercurrents going on. And also when you've mentioned the line about his mum, and there's been a lot of these days since his mother got sick, that's quite an important quote because it's the first time that we hear mention of his mum, and it makes sense of the first half of the text. Then it shows us what the dream could have been about, and then the fact that you've mentioned the use of the metaphor to describe that she's little more than a ghost. If you just said at the end and emphasised the part of the structure there, that would have given you more marks, would have got it into the level 3 band, if not level 4. But it's not a bad score, so well done. Moving on to question 4, where you've been asked to what extent you agree that the part of the story set during breakfast time shows that Alex is struggling to cope with his mother's illness. So you've made a good start when you said that you agree with the students who said this part of the story shows Alex is struggling. And you said, working from line 16, which emphasised the model of Alex, this shows that Alex missed his mum's breakfast even though the father was making an effort to make him pancakes. Typical man who leaves all the cooking to the woman. And Alex wished that he could talk to his mum for reassurance, which is what mothers are good at. Unfortunately, you've not really given a quote in there to back up what you've said. You've then gone on to say Alex was angry at his dad because he hopes his father could do more to help the mum get better. He was angry with everyone around him and at life for being cruel. Again, no quote. And then you said in line 30, the writer described what a typical single dad could do by not knowing how to cook or knowing the right things to stock the refrigerator with and eating out at night. To further explain what women or mothers could do better. It's not really focused on showing us how Alex isn't coping there, it's more about the dad. And then you said during the time that Alex's mum was ill, he misses her presence and had been upset. Even though she was described as a disciplinarian, he loves and misses and wishes his mum was back to normal. So again, no quotes. In here we've got a little bit of the methodology, how the writer shows some understanding about the writer's method. So you said the use of short sentences in describing the woman shows that Alex adores his mum. Sharp, impossible to feel her, and further connotes that she was a very smart woman. And then you've mentioned the metaphor again, which shows that although she's still alive, she lives like an unseen being among them or closer to her grave. And you've also mentioned personification to describe some of her belongings. Unfortunately, a lot of this isn't focusing on showing us how Alex isn't coping. And so for that reason, it's got to be in the band 1. Because you've showed limited understanding of the writer's methods of how he's showing that Alex isn't coping. There's hardly any text in there at all. And you've only really once mentioned the focus of the question. You have made some comments on the effect of the reader, but a lot of it wasn't based on Alex, so you must make sure that you're answering the question that you've been asked. So for this question, that's 4 out of the possible 20 marks. So had you put quotes in to back up the points that were about Alex, and had the more of your points being based on showing how Alex isn't coping? For example, you've mentioned the fact that Alex is angry with everyone, his father's, his sister's, life in general, and even with his mum for getting sick. So had you used a quote in there and said something like, Mr. Jesse is desperately looking for someone to blame and isn't dealing with the situation very well at all. And the writer shows this through the dialogue when Alex snaps at his sisters when they're just making simple comments rather than trying to reassure them. And the writer also shows that Alex isn't coping by comparing what his mother used to be like to what she's like now, and how much Alex misses those simple things. So it wouldn't have taken much to have got you up to those higher marks, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. So with 4 out of the possible 20 marks for that one, it gives you an overall total of 17 out of 40 for the reading part of this question.